Hi guys. I actually noticed that as well. It was I think that was 1.5 years ago when I wrote an article on LinkedIn complaining on what was happening with Ethereum and the DAO and how people are approaching that. And I tried to put a tag in it, blockchain, it didn't. I made a little snapshot of it like, oh, that's going to be ironic that there is no such thing as a blockchain tag. Apparently it's not ironic, it's still the case. So if that's still the case, then we have a lot of explanation to do. What I hope to do here today for you there's a counter here that says I have less than 30 minutes left, is to give you a bit of idea about what this technology is, what it brings to the table, but also about how you can approach this. Because the biggest question that we get is, what is my business case and what do I need to do with it? Well, if life were only that easy, right? So let me see how this works. Oh, it works, cool. So what is innovation? It's basically preparing your business for tomorrow. It doesn't mean that you have to have this large business, but there's always going to be things that change. And if there's technology that will inspire that, then it's good to be understanding of why that is such a case. So this is how we do it at Cegeka. And for the people that know Cegeka as a company, there's a lot of services that we offer in terms of outsourcing, in terms of hosting, in terms of software development. But innovation wasn't really on the top of our priority list. And today it is. And it means that we innovate with a specific strategy in mind. And that strategy is basically the horizon strategy that most people know from McKinsey. It is that you look at what you need to innovate and in what kind of ways to be successful for, in our case, our customers. And it means that there's such a thing as incremental innovation, where we try to improve on the things that are already in place today and how we can make them better. There's the opportunities that arise when you take what you have today and apply it to new business units. But there's also the disruptive part, where there's technology where everybody feels that it's going to have this large impact on how we're going to do business tomorrow and the day after, but it's not going to change overnight. And that's what we set out to do. So we set up an incubator within Cegeka, and we said, look, let's try to find out how blockchain works. And let's see how it fits in the sectors that we're specialized in. And let's see how it can align or augment the things we do today. And that's not easy. So that's not easy either. So if we look at how we approach this, and there's a lot of solutions, of divisions that have solutions in place today. There's the more classical ones on the left, which is what Cegeka does today and does very well. And then at the bottom right, there's the stuff that is more interesting in the topic of today, right? There's the ecosystems that we try to develop, either with or without blockchain. And there's the labs, where we basically try and fiddle with new things to understand them better so that we can help both ourselves and our customers. One of those things is blockchain, right? And that's what I would like to talk to you about today. So I think that only 3 minutes for a corporate presentation was short enough. I hope you appreciate that. If we talk about blockchain, then it doesn't work as I was hoping. Then we have a nice track record, which I like to brag about, but not that much. It is that we have a team set up since 2015. So in the early days, when we were still looking at what is Ethereum going to do, what is Bitcoin going to do, we already got together a team. Some of the people are in the audience today, and we tried to figure it out. And figuring it out means there is no business goal, there is no customer expectation. There's just us trying to figure out what is this going to do and how does it work. So we worked with Ripple when it was still an open network. There was no Ethereum, we played around with Bitcoin. And today we actually got quite far. And we help a lot of the companies on a global level to understand this better and to put this to practice. So the team has now expanded in the last 2 years. We're more than 10 people over. And we have some real experience that I'm more than happy to share with you today. So, of course, there's a cheesy quote coming up in a bit about why do we do this, etc. There it is. So that's about how to innovate. And with the case of blockchain, the biggest, I would say, mistake is that people try to apply this technology to what they do today and then ask themselves, is it better? It's basically like VMware, the virtualization software for servers. First you had 2 servers, then there was VMware, and then you had 1 server, so everybody could calculate that you saved yourself 1 server. Applause, everybody happy. The problem with blockchain, it doesn't really work that way. If you try to apply blockchain technology to your existing process, usually it will not become smarter, it will not become better, it will not outperform everything else you did. It's not a database that goes faster. So if all of that is not the case, you need to approach it in a different way. And in the case with blockchain technology, it's about collaboration. It's about building ecosystems where multiple parties exchange information, and if they can do that in an equal way, then they all benefit. That's what this technology brings to the table. And if that's the case, then you can start to understand that it's therefore not about the existing process with technology. It's about rethinking the process with this technology in mind to understand how you can make it better. And there's plenty of examples to go from, and I'll walk you through it. But first, what is blockchain for those who have absolutely no idea what I've been going on for the last 5 minutes? So blockchain technology is nothing more than a shared ledger. A shared ledger like you know from anywhere else. It's just a ledger that lists transactions happening from one account to another. And these transactions can be anything varying from money to contracts to votes to ownership titles. Basically, it can be anything. And this ledger is not stored on one computer, but it's stored on multiple computers that are connected through the internet on a private network. Anyway, and these computers, they all do the same thing. They validate and they store transactions that are valid. And instead of doing that and claiming authority over that, they say, look, I, as one computer, validate this transaction, I store it, and I announce it to the rest of the network. And all the other computers in the network come to the same conclusion, hopefully. And if that's the case, then the transaction is most likely valid. If it's not the case, then the transaction is probably rogue, and it's therefore not to be added to the blockchain. So these blockchain networks are autonomous. They work according to their own predefined set of rules. And the networks can be as large as spanning the globe. As we all know, the Bitcoin blockchain does that. But they can also be very small blockchains that run between two organizations to exchange information. Mind you, that's not the preferred way that we like to approach it, but it's good to understand that the technology is as flexible as that. And what it basically does in its core is it allows you to eliminate a third party that now today stores your information or your value. And the easy example that I gave earlier today was that today you need a bank to have a bank account. And you need to have a government to have a government ID. You need to have a hospital or a doctor to have a patient record. And that simple fact is changed by this technology because the reason why it is today as it is because you need someone to do that for you that you trust. You don't give your money to anyone on the street. You give it with a bank because the government made the banks promise that they would do it in a nice way. So what if today there is technology that can take over that task from them? What if you can have an account with money in it, in a cloud, that's untouchable, and that just works the way it works, right? So first couple of years, everybody said, that's kind of weird, we don't trust it, that's odd. And now today, you see that the largest banks in the world are looking at this possibility. That's the European Central Bank, it's the Bank of International Settlements, and all these guys pivoted 180 degrees. When you can see reports of them from 2015 saying, Bitcoin is a pyramid scheme, warn your customers. And now suddenly they're all about, hey, this stuff is interesting. These are the questions that we need to answer to understand what the impact would be of a bank account without a bank. And this is how we would like to go at it. And it will take us probably 5 years to iron out these questions and then come with a plan of attack. So this is how fast the most conservative organizations in our world today are changing their minds about the applicability of this technology. So if they're changing their minds, perhaps it's time that we do so too. If you have another one, most obliged. Is this the next slide? Let me see. It is. OK. So one of the things that we built in the early days of 2016 was the digital trade chain. And some know it because there was a lot of exposure around it. And digital trade chain is an experiment that we did together with our partner KBC Bank, where the big challenge on the table was how do we bring buyers and sellers in the world together in such a way that we no longer need a bank. Because today, if you do trade finance, it means that there's a buyer and there's a seller. They both go to their own bank, and then the banks come up with some sort of agreement, finance the transaction, then it happens. This is how today all the global transactions work. Container shipments, goods, stuff like that. And it's quite inefficient. So if you can bring buyer and seller together in such a way that you, as a bank, can verify that they both signed a contract, and that you can trust on that, then you can also finance that. And as a bank, you no longer need to be in the middle. And as buyer and seller, you can actually start to look for other banks as well. So that was an interesting proposition that we tried to tackle, and we did that by starting to build it. So instead of sitting at a table for months and months, we decided to put it to practice, build a platform that can do that, and then evaluate how it would work in practice. So we did that in 4 months, and it was that successful that KBC brought it to a number of other banks and say, hey, let's do this together and put it out there. And it was that successful that IBM said, thank you very much, Cegeka, we'll do that for you. So, too bad, bit of a loss, can happen. But never mind, we're very proud of this, because it shows that if you have the right mindset to apply this technology, you can make things different in a better way. So, then we wondered to ourselves that if we can do this once, what do we need to do this twice? How can we help organizations to understand what to do with this technology? Because the trade finance topic was something that we learned from past experiences and from past knowledge. But there are many other cases out there that could benefit from this technology. And what we learned when we start to talk to customers is that they basically have one question. It's like, will this technology disrupt me? Which is a bit of a weird question, because the technology itself will never do that. The question is, how fast can you use the technology to build a solution to disrupt something, right? And if that's the case, then how will that impact the way that you do business with customers, suppliers, partners, etc.? And nobody really has an answer on this. Most companies that we talked to didn't know. And when they don't know, they don't do anything. And we thought that was odd, because we were challenging them, say, if you don't know how this will pan out for you in the next 5 to 10 years, then why don't you do anything about that? Because the only irresponsible thing to do is do nothing based on a lack of knowledge. So we wanted to see how we can help organizations to understand if this technology actually is going to do something for them, yes or no. And if the answer is no, cool, everybody rest asleep, go to bed, nothing will happen in the foreseeable 10 years, hopefully. But if the answer is yes, then you cannot sit still and wait for something to happen. So there's some kind of services out there that are, as they say, ripe for disruption. There's a kind of bank that lists shares. So this is a bank with a specific name called a custodian bank, and they hold information on what shares are out there and who owns them. Now, you can already sort of see that if this technology can fulfill that task as well as they can, then how long will it take for regulators to say to this bank, it's good that you do this, but we will also allow other alternatives. So this is the kind of challenge that these kind of banks have for this technology. So if we want to help them, then we need to help them answer the right questions. And the questions that we lined up were these. So what information do you share with other parties? And we deliberately talk about information here because most organizations like to talk about processes. And they say, oh, we have this purchase process. Can blockchain make it better? But it's about information. What information that results from your process has to be shared with other parties? So if there's a purchase process, it's nice that you will end up with a piece of paper. But then you have to take this piece of paper to your bank to finance the purchase that you made, which is quite cumbersome. So we asked the companies to look at the information flow. And then you see that the information flows to many other places. So instead of just looking at paperwork that flows everywhere, we asked them to look at information. And then you see that there's all kinds of information, like a confirmation, there's invoices, there's identities, there's plane tickets. And that information flows as much as it needs to or as affordable as it is. And then there's a lot of information that needs to flow to others, but doesn't. It's simply stuck somewhere or it's too expensive to disclose. But it's good to think about that, because perhaps now with this technology you can disclose such information. And a simple example is that today, if you insure your house so that it doesn't burn down and you have to pay a mortgage for a house that's no longer there, then you can easily cancel this insurance. And the bank that will issue the mortgage will never know. Because for that bank, it's too expensive to ask every insurance company, is that house still insured? They simply don't do it. They accept that once a year a house burns down that wasn't insured, and that's the end of it. But with this technology, it actually becomes affordable to do that. So a bank could track to see if there was an insurance policy on this house. So if that's the case, then as a bank, would you still like to take the risk? Or would you still say, let's look at new technology and see how we can make that different, eliminate the risk, and give cost savings partially to our customers? So that's one of the takes. The other thing is that a lot of organizations bear responsibility for certain pieces of organizations. If you work for an employer, your employer is responsible to share your payment check with certain organizations if they have to. They have to share it with the government for tax purposes. They have to share it with a bank for lending purposes. They have to share it, in our case in the Netherlands, with landlords if you want to rent a specific house or apartment that has a specific income threshold. So you are responsible as an organization to have that information and to be the owner of that. And then the question is, if you have that responsibility, then how do you balance it out? So how do you, at one hand, protect that information from falling into the wrong hands, and at the same time enable to share that information with the parties that need to have access to it? And that's complicated because we used to do that in the classical way, which is build an API and tell the other guy, hey, here's the API, connect to our system and you can fetch it, which works well if it's just a one-on-one connection. But now you have hundreds of insurance companies that can insure a house. And now you have hundreds of banks that can issue a mortgage. So will we make 10,000 API connections to make that work? It's simply infeasible. So we don't. So then comes the execution part. If you have all these questions lined up and you understand that there's information that will benefit from this technology and that your business will benefit from that implementation, then the question is, should we create or participate such an ecosystem? As an employer, is it interesting to share that information? Not because it will reduce costs, but because it will allow people to get a mortgage faster, right? The cost saving is not that relevant. The fact that we can speed things up because we can share information reliably with each other, that's the interesting part. And then you can actually start to find the business case that will work for your organizations. If you are an organization that purchases goods from multiple suppliers, today you issue purchase orders to each and every supplier and ask them, can you make a bid? And then you have to reconcile all that information, choose the cheapest bidder, as you agreed to do, and then purchase it. But what if you could create a little marketplace that would allow all the suppliers to see what kind of goods you're requesting from them, and then allow them to bid on it transparently, so that you create your own marketplace? It will allow for transparency, for trust to be created between all the suppliers, and it will also allow you to cut down on the expense that you make for either administering all that stuff and on the purchased goods themselves. Because more suppliers means more market, and that means you get lower cost and a better market equilibrium. So if that actually becomes a goal and we get this far, then it's about how to find the right resources to do this. How do you assess which blockchain technology will work or not? And this is actually one of the discussions that most customers like to have. What blockchain technology do we choose? It's most of the time the most irrelevant question to ask, because if you're still thinking about the business model, then basically every blockchain out there will allow you to prove that the business model you have in mind either works or not. And as soon as you have the business model in mind, your use case becomes far more clear. And if we know the use case, we can start to discuss what blockchain meets the requirement for that use case. Not every blockchain should process 10,000 transactions a second. So the fact that some blockchains aren't scalable doesn't really matter. But you need to know the use case. So instead of trying to go for a technology-first approach, we go for a business case-first approach. And that was, for our company, a first as well. Because we were used to approach things with technology, and now we try to approach these challenges with a business kind of sense. How do we do this? And of course, how do we collaborate? Because as Cegeka, we don't innovate everything ourselves. We don't make the blockchains out there. But we like to help to understand and explain to the customers that we have what technologies and opportunities are out there. If there are startups that build a very specific business case around a blockchain and put a lot of time and effort in it, they'll do a much better job than we do. So we work with these startups because the only thing that these startups cannot and don't want to do is work directly with a very large customer, such as a KBC or Shell or any other customer that we have, and then tell them, yes, great solution, please integrate it in our existing landscape. That will wear out the entire startup because the integration requirements from such large organizations are basically impossible to meet. So that's where we also try to build a bridge between startups and between large enterprises that do want to work together, but really have no idea how to do it in practice. So, is blockchain for you? That's a bit of an open question, and we always try to line up when yes, when no. This is not an exhaustive list by far, and it's always up for debate, but you should at least have some sort of level of interest. If you see, look, there are multiple intermediaries in this chain of information that have roles that this technology could also fulfill. So for instance, if you look at a port, there's the port of Rotterdam. In a port, it's important to log when a ship sails out, because that determines the invoices that have been sent, if the goods were loaded on time, etc. So if that's important, then why today they have 4 different people that log the time, right? It's quite inefficient, and usually these people just call each other to ask them, so what time did you put in the log for when the ship left the port? So in this case, it might be beneficial to use this technology to make sure all these parties are aligned. It will actually save a lot of cost and will also avoid a lot of confusion. Same thing is that you have more than 2 parties that need to agree on information, right? If there's a buyer and a seller, and they want to have their transaction insured, then insuring that transaction is something that benefits multiple parties, right? The buyer wants to know that the goods are insured until they arrive at their destination. The seller wants to know that payment is insured so that regardless if the goods arrive or not, he's going to get paid. So transparency in such supply chains is quite relevant for multiple parties than one. So connectivity to all parties in such a network is beneficial to all of them. So in that case, blockchain might prove to be a solution for the misalignment that usually occurs. And that misalignment is that not everybody understands fully who is bearing the risk at what time. So that that's the same about conflicting interest, right? When you share information, sometimes there's conflicting interest about who owns that. That's what we know, the escrow payments. You ship goods, you receive goods, and then in escrow the money is held. But who determines if money is released, yes or no? Blockchain might allow you to be and build a more transparent solution. So everything that's paper heavy, it's not that the blockchain resolves paper, but you see in today's world that paper is still used to make an agreement about something that multiple parties trust. If I go to whatever party to have an insurance, then I get a piece of paper that says these are the conditions under which your goods or services are insured. And because I receive it on paper, that allows me to trust it, because it means that if something goes wrong, I can show them the paper and say, this is what we agreed. That's why they like paper. If they were to do it in their IT systems, I wouldn't have anything to rely on. But if you would have such an insurance policy on a blockchain technology, then you could actually prove that that insurance policy was not altered over time, and that it was a digital contract, which would be secure for both you and for the insurer. So this is how you can replace the function of paper. Not paper itself, because you don't need to, but the function of paper can be changed. So there's about offering services outside of networks, and then there's the favorite argument for most banks. It can help you to be more compliant and to prevent fraud. This is not an easy one, because there are very specific cases in which this is true or not. So it's something to keep an eye on, but don't focus on these kind of benefits to see if you can or want to have a bigger interest in this topic. Of course, there's also things that don't make sense, right? If there are 2 companies that trust each other and they do business today, then a blockchain won't really help much, right? The trust is there, it's in a contract, they don't need other people to process that trust information, so who cares? And same goes for when there is already a mandatory or preferred party who processes all kinds of information. This can be a dominant party in a market that is collecting information on behalf of multiple groups, and that party is already there. To give you an example, there is an interesting experiment going on with a group of farmers that their data about their crops and their harvesting is being collected by a central party, so that the farmers cannot see each other's data, but they can all benefit from the analysis on that data so that they can all improve their harvest next year. So here you actually appoint a central party to protect individual interests of farmers. You might as well just use blockchain technology to do this, where you use the technology to unlock only the data that's relevant to share and process, and then share the results with everyone. And you could even reward them for it. But you'll understand that these things don't come overnight, right? There is going to be this party that has developed this solution as it is. And given the new benefits and the early stages of blockchain technology, you do not want to throw your existing solutions out of the window today, but you want to be ready for tomorrow. So this will not eliminate and allow you for huge sunk cost business cases, but it will allow you to look at it and say, wow, if we're going to do a technology refresh of this, we should consider it. And the same with processes that are low cost and high volumes, such as, at the moment, national payment processing. There's all kinds of complex systems that allow you to pay in your own country, These systems are highly optimized, and in Europe, they're trying to make them even faster. Everybody is sort of in agreement that blockchain would provide additional benefits on top of it, but we're not going to change that overnight. So looking to replace existing payment systems with blockchain technology on the short term is not something that you should focus on. So this is the approach that we came up with after a while. And a while means that we did a lot of POCs, we did a lot of workshops, and we think that we have a good idea on how we can help our customers to understand this the best way possible. So the first thing we notice is that people should have the time to read up on this stuff, right? There's a lot of information around it, and there's a lot of nonsense around it as well, and you need to form your own opinion and ideas on how this technology can potentially help you out. And some people prefer to do that on their own time and to read up on this stuff. And they regularly ask us, can you provide a demo? Can you provide some sort of video? Can you help us out? So learning is the first step. Then there's a step of getting more engaged. And that's actually a three-pronged approach where you want to control the cost of getting involved. And at the same time, fail fast and fail often to flush out what is the best use case for you. So in detail, this is the following things that we did. There it is. It took us about as long. So the first thing that we do is we offer the training. We do that once every 3 months. And the training is not to become a better blockchain developer. The training is about to understand what this technology can do for your business. So we worked one out. It's only a day. At the moment, we only have them in the Netherlands and Belgium, so sorry for that. But if there's enough interest, I'm more than happy to expand it. What we also did was we made a website with use cases. Because a lot of customers ask us, what is my use case? Since every organization is different, it's impossible to just come up with a use case that's relevant for your company. We don't understand all the challenges you have today, and we don't understand the strategic directions in where you want to head to tomorrow. So we want to help you to understand what might be good for you. So what we did is we made a website with use cases that are expressed and explained from a business case perspective. So we don't say this is an application of Bitcoin, but we say, look, this is how you can vote electronically by use of this technology in this way. And the use case website, it's going to be live somewhere next week. And we got a lot of positive feedback on it, and we'll keep on expanding on it. So we also build a demo that works in practice, where you can go to a website and create such an insurance contract that I talked about earlier for your house. And then your mortgage supplier can see if your house is still insured. But you can also cancel the contract yourself. And all that is registered on Ledger so that there's no discrepancy between what you agree with the insurance company, yourself, and with the lending company. And the additional nice feature that would be there as well is with PSD2. It's the Payment Service Directive in Europe. You could also mandate that insurance policy to do the payments for you. So that means that the payment and the insurance policy are starting to come together in one, instead of payments going on while there is no policy anymore. So you'll see that a lot of interesting integrations will occur over time, where payment integration will occur with underlying contracts on blockchain technology. So that's a demo case that we built, and you're free to try it out, and any feedback we get is more than welcome. And the fourth one is that we identify the blockchain use case with a starter kit. And the starter kit is basically an 8-pager in which we crammed all the knowledge that we have about what can you do with this and how can that work. So the thing that I wanted to highlight, because I'm approaching the end of my time, is that you want to build your first blockchain solution. And this is actually what we spend most of our time on last half year. What we learned is that building a blockchain POC is expensive. It takes a lot of time, not only from you, but also from our side. And the problem is that if you spend all this time on it and all this money, you only validate one use case. But what you want to do is you want to validate as many use cases as you can. So what we did is we sat down with Microsoft, who came up with the idea of having a sort of prototype framework. And we like that idea a lot. But the problem with large conglomerates is that they only build it for themselves. So what we proposed to Microsoft is that instead of building this blockchain application just for the Ethereum blockchain that they supported, we wanted to integrate the Hyperledger blockchain that is driven by IBM as well. And after a couple of months, they said yes. So at Microsoft Ignite a couple of days ago, they introduced a blockchain app builder testing framework that will be released to the general public in October. We'll be one of the SIs that has the exclusivity to build solutions with it. And that solution can do both Ethereum blockchains, Hyperledger blockchains, and many more that we're working on. So this will allow you to do this for 10,000 euro. So for 10,000 euro, you get a POC that's up and running and that you can take to your company. The other slides that I have, and I'm more than happy to share them with you, are about how we scale up and how we move on after the POC. This is a step that we're more than happy to discuss with you. It's a lengthy process. We're doing this. We brought stuff to production as well with one of the partners that we have. And it's very interesting to do so. It taught us a lot, and we're more than happy to share that knowledge with you. So I would like to thank you for your time so far. I hope that you learned something from it. If you're interested in a demo from the Microsoft framework, apparently we still have that instance up and running from Ignite. So we're more than happy to share you. Just approach me here, and we'll see what we can work out. So far, thank you very much for your attention, and have a pleasant event.
Thank you very much, Sander.